My name is Dick, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Dick.
Good to be here. I haven't been to one of these meetings, so I've been asked to share in quite a long time. I've been through this process with a Big Book Step Study sponsor. I've done step 9. Most of it is just a few left to go. And I practiced 10, 11, 12 as often as I can. I'm not going to say on a daily basis because that would be a lie. And this is supposed to be an honest program, so I do the best I can. And I fail at times. I'll do a little bit of my, some people call it a drunkalogue, but it's my experience out there and my experience in here. Sometimes they come together. My drinking started when I was 18, really. Back when I was 4 or 5, and you had holidays, you know, you had Christmas and Thanksgiving and those types of holidays, the bottle of wine would come out and everybody got a little glass. And, you know, if I'd have known that feeling that I was having when I was having that little taste of wine, I could have told my mother I was an alcoholic at 4 or 5, but I didn't know. Because when I smelled that stuff and I took that little sip, I could feel something. Something was going on, but I didn't have a clue. Some years later, from 4 to 18, when I started drinking in the service, I had a few drinks at the end of basic training, and something happened. I got drunk. I didn't know I was going to get drunk. I just went down to the battalion bar with the rest of the guys, they call it the canteen, to have a couple of drinks. And I did. And when I got back to the barracks, I started tipping things over. I tipped over wall lockers and foot lockers and the bunks. And I had an episode that had never occurred to me, it never happened to me before. I didn't know what it was. And all I knew was that I was going to get trouble when the rest of the guys came back. And they call it a blanket party. That's when they pull a blanket over your head and beat the daylights out of you because you did something stupid. And but somebody came in and they said, must have been the drill sergeant. And that's when I started to blame. I learned about blaming then. I could blame the drill sergeant and get away with stuff. I could blame the truck driver because he got stuck in the mud. I could blame anybody for anything, and it worked. I could blame everybody for my drinking. I could blame the family for my drinking. I could blame, you name it, and I could blame somebody for something. And, you know, I drank for 26 years alcoholically. And as time went on, and I came into the program, and I was doing a beginners meeting over in Auburn, and I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. Let me back up. When I was out there drinking, things weren't right, and I didn't know that. I didn't know. They talk about the disease being centered in the mind. They talk about, you know, things being in the mind in this reading, and I had no clue that my mind had been affected by alcohol. I knew it got affected when I was drinking, but I didn't know that when I wasn't drinking, it was still affected. My ex-wife used to call it stinking thinking, and I used to poo-poo that. You know, stinking. What are you talking about? And I didn't know that until I came into the program and started hearing things. I went to a beginners meeting in Auburn, like I started to say, and after a few weeks of being there, a woman came up to me. Her name was Elaine, and she says, you know, Dick, she says, you got to forgive yourself because God has already forgiven you. And it talks about, in the reading today, it talks about picking a God of your own understanding. And she told me, why don't you pick a God of your own understanding? So I started thinking about that. I said, God of my understanding, I can deal with that. When I was young, I was born and raised a Catholic. Not that that has anything to do with anything, but that's where I came from. And you know, as every good Catholic little boy does, he goes to confession, and the priest, you know, slides that magical little door that nobody knows who's on the other side. And you start doing your confession, and he says, you know, Richard, you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. God's not going to forgive you because you're not really sorry. you know, and I don't know how old I was, maybe 10. And, you know, in step 2 in the 12 and 12, it talks about leaving your childhood God behind. It talks about your childhood God in this reading. And, you know, I don't know how old I was, but someplace during my drinking career, I thought about what that priest said, you know, you're not really sorry, God's not going to forgive you. So I stopped praying to God for me. I could pray to God because he was still in my life. I could pray for my kids, I could pray for you, I could pray for anybody. I couldn't pray for me anymore because I figured I used up all my chips, all my get me out of this, and I won't do that again. Don't let me get caught with this, and I will promise I'll never do that again. Well, I was lying, you know, because I knew that I was going to do it over again because it's just what I did for a long, long time. And so I turned away from my childhood God. And when this woman told me, when I came into the program, and told me to pick a God of my own understanding, I thought about that for a bit. Because my God, the one I was brought up with, if you ate meat on Friday, you went to hell. And if you said his name in a bad way, you went to hell. I was going to hell, because I'd done it a lot. And so I started thinking, the God of my understanding, that would be a God that was patient and tolerant, forgiving and loving, compassionate. And that's the God I have today. And without that higher power, I know where I'm going. You know, like I said, I drank for 26 years alcoholically. And they talk about a spiritual experience, and I don't know whether this is one or not, if it qualifies for one, because I hadn't been in the program yet. But I was working a job up in Vermont. I went to the phone booth, and I picked up the phone, and I dialed AA. It was like Danville, Vermont. The book was about this thick. So I didn't have much trouble finding A. And there was another A right after it. And so I dialed that number, and there was a guy at the other end of the line. It was a recording. He says, "My name is Dan, and I'm an alcoholic. If you're looking for a meeting, here's where they are." And he said where they were, and I said, "Son, there's one right on the road. We're building a highway. There's one right on the highway that we're building." So I went to that meeting. And, when I got out of the phone booth, I just opened the door and walked out after listening to the message. And it was like something happened. The feeling, or I drank every night, or pretty close to every night for 26 years. I mean, there's always been that, you know, that, well, I'm all right, I'm not going to drink for this month. I'll show you I'm not an alcoholic, because I had a lot of experience of that too. And consequently, I drank at the end of every time I said I wasn't going to drink. I went out and drank too much, you know, whatever was at the end of a Lenten season or whatever. And I just said, I'm an alcoholic. What do you want from me? I drink, and I get drunk. And but anyways, where was I?
You came out of the phone booth.
Oh yeah, I came out of the phone booth, and it was like something had been lifted. I didn't know what it was. I didn't have a clue, but I didn't drink that night. I went to my room. I went up to the store, this place. There was a little store below us, and I got an ice cream cone instead of a beer. That's pretty good for an alcoholic. and I went upstairs, and I sat down in the room, and I had the ice cream. Well, Wednesday night was going to be my first night, or my first AA meeting ever. And I went to that meeting, and they gave me a coffee, a cookie, and a Doyle cone, a little plastic chip for gambling, and that was my 24-hour cone. And before I left that meeting, they gave me a big book and a step study. You know, they had a raffle, and I didn't win it, but before I left, I had a big book and a 24-hour, the Hazelton one. I know I swear in Hazelton, but that's okay. And that book, this book, was the first book in my life that I read from cover to cover. In school, I cheated a lot. Front jacket, first chapter, middle chapter, last chapter, back jacket, book report. Done. Everything else I made up in the middle, just like I did with life. I made shit up. So after that, again, it brings me back to, I spent some time in Vermont the last 3 months. My first 3 months of sobriety was 1 meeting a week in this book. And I went to the beginners meeting was where I started. Somebody from that beginners meeting told me about the steps. You know, I didn't know anything about step meetings. I didn't know anything about anything. And I went to a step meeting and I started, you know, reading the steps. And I got up to step 2 and it talks about, you know, we had Gnostics. And I wrote myself a couple of things. I had a little bout with cancer last year, and my wife likes to call it chemo brain, but I got a built-in forgetter. So once I get off of my story, I kind of got to get little reminders here. You'll have to put up with me. You know, where they talk about the beginners meeting. You know, people have a problem with the G word. I don't know if there's any beginners in here, and if there's any people that have a problem with God or using God. But, you know, my name is Richard. My mother and father used to call me son. My kids call me a father. My nephews call me an uncle. My grandchildren call me Pepe, and my friends call me Dick. So I got a lot of names. So, and I'm just a guy, you know what I mean? Now God, I don't think he has a problem with you calling Christ Yahweh, Buddha, Ishmael, or Spirit of the Universe. You know, my higher power is not suffering from any identity crisis. My God knows who he is or she is. She doesn't have a gender crisis either. So I'm pretty much all set in any direction I want to go. And I've been through this confession thing with the priest. And it talks about, you know, we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. And that for me was big, to have my own conception of God, because like I said, the God that I grew up with, it wasn't working. It really wasn't working. And it talks about God as we understood him. And it repeats itself many times throughout this reading, our own conception of God. You know, so I mean, I think that Bill's trying to drive this into us, that, you know, what you believe in or how you believe, it doesn't affect me at all. You know, and how I believe or what I think, I choose to call my higher power God. But if you want to call him Ishmael, that's cool. We'll talk about the same guy. You know, I don't have a problem with that. And it doesn't matter whether I have a problem with that, because you shouldn't have a problem with me having a problem. I'm an alcoholic. I got a lot of problems. and it talks about, you know, open-mindedness. There we are again, you know. For me, I have to be open-minded, because my mind was like a steel trap when I was drinking. It slammed shut on things, on people, on situations, and I was right and you were wrong. One of the principles I lived with and grew up with, my dad was a very strict man, and one of the principles I lived up with was might makes right. If you were bigger, tougher, could speak louder, could be more angry than the person you're dealing with, then you were right and they were wrong. And that's the way I grew up. And that was one of my principles. So, you know, for this alcoholic, it took change. You know, if you don't change, nothing changes, something like that. And I had to make a lot of changes. And it was here in step 2 where it began changing. Step 1, actually, was when I admitted that I was power sober alcohol, and that my life had become unmanageable. I didn't know that. I didn't know that I was an alcoholic until somebody told me I wasn't here. People told me I was an alcoholic long before I got to AA. No, that didn't work, because you didn't know. And when I came here and I listened to that first meeting that I went to, and people were talking, you know, about what they had done and how they got here, I listened, and somebody told me, I don't know if it was at the first meeting or not, but to identify and not to compare. And that's carried a lot of weight for me all the way through this, is when I identify, because I can be a judge. I can judge you in an instant. You know, I can see the pants that you're wearing. I don't like those pants. That guy's a freaking idiot, you know. but because of this program, I've changed. I've changed my way of thinking. And boy, that needs some changing. And then it goes on, they talk about the prosaic steel girder, you know, and believing in science and stuff. We believe about electricity, we believe about steel girders, we believe that airplanes can fly. Of course we can. We look up in the sky and they're flying all over the place. But, you know, those things we believe, but trying to believe in something we can't touch, feel, or see, that's hard for some. You know, it was easy for me, and I'm grateful that it was easy for me. Anybody that does have a problem with that type of thing, just stick around. Things will change. And I mean, like I said, I drank for 26 years alcoholically, and I got on my knees and asked for help, and somebody told me how to do it because I didn't know how to do it. And I haven't had a drink in 22 years. I had nothing to do with it. You know, I had nothing to do with it. All I did was ask for help. And, you know, I knew who I was asking. I knew who I was asking for help, but I'd never done it before. And I don't know how that works. You know, all I know is that it does. That I ask a power greater than myself, because I was the great I am. You know, I did everything. I had glaucoma. It's like an eye disease. I did this. I did that. I can do this. I don't need your help. You know, and come to find out I did need help. And talks about all-powerful guiding creative intelligence. Boy, if that doesn't describe God, you know. Well, yeah, Wago Bushmail, whoever you want to talk to, it's okay. And it talks about prejudice against organized religion. Live and let live. It's one of our little banners that we see in all the halls, you know. Just for me, live and let live it works good. And again, I talked about change. They show how the change came over them. For this alcoholic, it was the program. It was God. It was a power greater than myself, and it was listening to other people at other meetings, and because I do have a built-in forgetter. It's just not the chemo. I really do have a built-in forgetter, and I just want to kind of move along. He talks about on page 52, when I was third chapter, third paragraph down, it says we couldn't, trouble with personal relationships, we couldn't control our emotional natures, prey to misery and depression, and living, we have feeling of uselessness, we were full of fear. My biggest fear was the fear that I thought you thought of me, you know? I would look at you, if I was in a room full of people and people were pointing all over the place, if they pointed in my direction, they were talking about the people behind me, they were talking about me, you know, and I was feeling bad. I was fearful that, what did they say? Why did they say that about me? Why are they giggling over there, you know? And it was, this is my mind. This is, when they say that the problem of alcoholics is centered in his mind, they're not shitting. It's centered in my mind. What little was up there, it's growing. It talks about reliance upon the spirit of the universe. Bill doesn't always call God. Next line down he does, but he calls God other things besides God. And, for me, Bill Wilson and God wrote this book because I don't believe anybody could have done this in the manner that he did, in the way that he did this in 12 steps. This is the 12 steps, but I mean the 12 and 12. Bill had help, and I don't mean all the people that he talked to. There was somebody else that was working with him for sure. It talks about here, and I'm going to stop after this. It says, we've been seeing other kinds of flight and spiritual liberation from this world, people who rose above their problems. This is hard. 2014 wasn't very good to Dick. I lost my daughter She was 42 to Lou Gehrig's disease. My mother died in April, and then I was diagnosed with cancer in July. I didn't drink. God carried me. That's all I got.